Alright guys, Murph's here, and today I want to issue a bit of a shooting challenge here on the channel. Now this is the first time that we've done something like this on the channel, and how successful it is overall will kind of dictate whether or not it's something that I continue to do. But I thought it would be kind of fun to video me completing a shooting challenge and then giving you guys the opportunity to be able to do the same thing at your local ranges, and then meet me on the Murph's Law Facebook page and post the videos so we can kind of discuss some of the pros and cons of what it is that you did and what you noticed about doing it with the rifle that you did it with. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the challenge a little bit and talk about some of the things that you're going to need in order to be able to complete the challenge. So, you're going to need a shot timer. You're going to need some type of shooting range that has at least 100 yards. Now, it doesn't matter to me if you do this at a private range, at a public range, or at your own personal range. I don't really care. You just need 100 yards. And then you also need a military surplus rifle. So, in this case, what's going to constitute military surplus rifle? Because people who've been on the channel for a little while know that I have a bit of a very open definition for what makes a military surplus rifle. In this case, I want it to be a wood and steel rifle, preferably produced prior to 1946. Now, post-1946 rifles can be utilized as long as they have the ability to be used with stripper clips. So, you can't necessarily use an AK-47 in order to complete this, but you can use an M1A as long as it still has a stripper clip bridge, and you have to use stripper clips. It's one of the key things here. No cheating with the detachable box magazines on the post-1946 options. So with that being the case, you can still use an M1 carbine and its detachable box magazine if you wanted to do this. The pre-1946 wood and steel firearms, and wood and steel is a definite aspect of this here. If you're doing the pre-1946 wood and steel firearms, you can utilize detachable box magazines that the system was built with it. This is pre-1946 adoption, so not necessarily production, but adoption is acceptable. Or anything that looks like it was pre-1946. So my M1 carbine, being a plain field machine company, still has the appropriate parts and features for a pre-1946 rifle. It would be acceptable for use for this challenge. Now what I actually used for it was this Polish WZ44, or better known as a Mosin Nagant M44 carbine, previously reviewed on the channel. Link in the description of that particular video. Now, how is the challenge undertaken? So what I did was I went out to my local range and I established a target at 25 yards, at 50 yards, and at 100 yards. And these were 12 by 12 targets. And the idea was that you had to place your hits within that 12 by 12 square. It's not that there's, A, B, C zones or D zones or anything like that. You just have to place hits on the 12 by 12 square. How I did it, timed, was 5 rounds standing, conducted my reload, 5 rounds standing at 25 yards, I should say. I conducted my reload, and then did 5 rounds standing at 50 yards. And from there, I conducted a reload and went to the kneeling position and fired 5 rounds at the 100-yard target. So it's a 15-round overall engagement and 2 reloads involved in the actual shooting process. Now for this, I utilized these strip clips that I have for the Mosin Nagants. These are actually some Chinese ones that I bought, which are quite terrible. I think they came in like a packet of 50, and so far I found maybe 10 that actually work semi-properly. And these are also incredibly sharp. I actually cut my thumb using these while I was out there. But I have the stripper clips available. You don't have to have stripper clips in order to be able to shoot this match or shoot this challenge, but it would really help out, especially on your times. All right, so let's go ahead and roll in some of my shooting footage. Now, first off, guys, I did go ahead and do a practice run on this before I shot what I expect to be the time that I'm posting on my Facebook page. But first, I shot it with this, a Finnish M37 Mosin Nagant chambered in 7.62x5.4. And I shot my first practice one with this particular rifle. And let's go ahead and take a look at that footage now. Sure. All right, guys, as we can see, this thing was kind of brutal to run. And a lot of that is because I'm very spoiled with this M44 carbine. It has an exceedingly smooth Mosin Nagant action, which Mosin Nagants are not necessarily known for. In fact, if you talk to a lot of old-time Mosin Nagant shooters, they'll tell you that their Mosins have a tendency to behave more like this bolt does, to where it was incredibly gummy, and I had to pretty much bruise my palm in order to be able to keep this thing in the fight. But I still managed to complete the challenge with an 88-second raw time. So I'll actually go down the like exact time below, but it was roughly 88 seconds. Now, something to keep in mind, guys, misses will cost you 2.5 seconds per miss. And I did have quite a few misses, and I'll go ahead and roll in all of my raw time and then my final score as well. So that was my practice one. That was my practice run with that particular rifle. Then I switched over to this one. Standing still. And my final score and final shoot, well, let's go ahead and roll in the footage for that here. Standing still. All right, guys, so that was a 65.42 raw time. And I had 2 misses, surprisingly at the 50 yard, to where it did not impact within the 12 by 12 box. So with that 5 additional seconds, I am at 70.42 overall score. All right, guys, so once again, you, of course, if you don't have Facebook or you don't want to get on the Facebook page or anything like that, you can go ahead and shoot this and either, post a video on YouTube, I guess, with a link in my comment section, or just, I'll trust it. Tell me what your times were in the comment section. But I would really love to see you guys' video on the Facebook page so that we could discuss more in depth what it is that you guys had going on. So like for this particular rifle, I was able to work this off the shoulder, unlike what I had to do with the M27. This has a surprisingly smooth bolt. However, once I started getting later into the overall shooting, and once I got down to the kneeling position, the bolt started to get a little bit more gummy. It was more difficult to work off of the shoulder at that point. I did have to break my actual weld with the rifle in order to be able to cycle the bolt. However, accuracy-wise, this thing did great. I actually, at the 50 and 100 yard target, had a 3-round cluster of impacts that were fairly close. At the 50 yard target, 3 of them were almost touching. And at the 100 yard target, they were still well within like my palm for impacts at 100. I'm fairly happy with that. Now, of course, those weren't 5-shot groups that were coming in that tight. There were some flyers off of those. At the 25, I found myself rushing just a little bit, and I almost split the edge on the edge of the 12 by 12 box, but I still managed to keep the impacts within enough in order to not necessarily make it a questionable call as to whether or not those counted. Now, in addition to that, something that I really began to appreciate about this M44 carbine was how easy it was to pick up the hooded front sight on the close range stuff and really kind of just stack it on top of my rear sight so that I could keep those hits stacked into the actual impact box. I felt really good about that. I was very surprised at how easy that was to work with. For longer distance shooting, I found the hooded sight a lot easier to pick up on the M44 carbine than I actually found on the protected blade type front sight on the M27. The M27, in combination with this notch type rear sight, was actually a little bit more difficult to line up, which I was very surprised by. In previous comparisons that I've done with the Mosin Nagant and other rifles available at the time period, I was less impressed with the Mosin Nagant sighting system. Now, of course, something like a Springfield 1903 A3 or A2 would be much better for the same type of application, but this M44 still did a fairly good job. Overall, I was very happy with it, personally. Now, the stripper clips, on the other hand, absolutely abysmal to try to feed with. They're just, I think a lot of it is still kind of forming them to the actual shape of the receiver. Maybe they're just too springy or something like that, but they don't feed nearly as smoothly as a Mauser type stripper clip feed system or even an M1 Garand's M block. So this is something that I definitely think kind of held me up a little bit in the shooting process. And I'm actually kind of curious as to how this would look if I did it with my Swedish Mauser, previously reviewed on the channel, link in the description. All right, guys, so I will throw the link to the Facebook page in the description. Go ahead and check that out. Hop onto the Facebook page. In general, if you enjoyed this content and you want more access to myself or other people of a similar mindset, go ahead and join the Murph's Law Facebook page. We've got discussions and stuff like that going on over there. Got behind the scenes, footage and all that kind of stuff, or bonus footage that only people who are on the Facebook page are going to get, as well as an opportunity to be able to ask questions or pick the brain of others around you. So, with that, guys, I think that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.